Again, here are the headlines. It's the top headline up on drudgereport.com. CDC refuses to identify where previous Ebola test originated. They're hiding the Ebola test locations. And again, Drudge first linked to us reporting on the beginnings of this yesterday. Now it's being covered by Breitbart, doing a great job. Immigrants, again, we'll get to that news here in a moment. Let me hit this news first. Some of it, again, is up on Infowars.com. The most complete coverage on Ebola is at drudgereport.com. And also PrisonPlanet.com is covering quite a bit of it. And we're covering on the nightly news as well. CDC refuses to identify where previous Ebola test originated. Tuesday evening, the CDC confirmed what we reported on in the morning to Breitbart News that individuals in the United States had been tested for Ebola. Those tests came back negative. You can't believe any of that. But the CDC would not identify the states where they originated. CNN's Dr. Sanjay Gupta reported Tuesday, that's what we reported on the Drudge picked up, that half a dozen people have been tested for Ebola. It's way more than that. And it's now being covered up. CDC gets dozens of calls about people who are ill after traveling in Africa. Economic Collapse blog reports, should we be alarmed that the CDC has received several dozen calls from hospitals around the country about people who are ill after traveling in Africa? As you read above and below, a lot more Ebola testing has been going on around the nation. We've been hearing about in the mainstream media. And then it goes on to break down that people are collapsing from Liberia and coming to Morocco and coming to London. I mean, just a lot of scary stuff going on. And again, I'm more concerned about government response and using this as a power grab than I even am about the Ebola. But this is undoubtedly a real pandemic in Africa, now in 5 nations at least. They've brought Ebola, at least 2 people, into Atlanta. It's a serious situation. But again, CNN reported yesterday, U.S. health authorities concerned, and they've been concealing the number of suspected Ebola victims from the public. Ebola tested across the nation, government suppressing the info. Ebola, BBC reports, global experts begin emergency talks at the World Health Organization. Global health experts at the World Health Organization are meeting to discuss new measures to tackle the Ebola outbreak. The meeting is expected to last 2 days and will decide whether to declare a global health emergency. Today, a man suspected of contracting Ebola died in Saudi Arabia. If confirmed, this will be the first Ebola-related death outside of Africa. The outbreak began in February in Guyana and has since spread to Liberia, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, and now to Saudi Arabia. On Wednesday, a nurse became the second person to die from Ebola in Nigeria. Nigeria's health minister and 5 other cases of Ebola have been treated in isolation. Sub-Saharan Africa's largest city. It comes as leading infectious disease experts have called for experimental treatments to be offered more widely. Let's continue. Ebola outbreak could be much worse than first thought. Johannesburg, South Africa. The worst outbreak of the deadly Ebola virus in history could actually be much worse than official death tolls reflect, the World Health Organization says. And again, they have a history of covering up how bad things really are when they're serious. Then when something isn't serious, like H1N1 5 years ago, they hype it up like it's the end of the world. But when we have governments as evil as this running things, that's the big concern. And why is the southern border still wide open? And why have Border Patrol agents, senior ones, gone public saying they've been ordered to load people up, vomiting with high fevers, you name it, from the Middle East, from Africa, and just let them come in on the buses, which is then increasing the surge of illegals coming in. Here's another one out of Reuters. Bodies dumped in streets as West Africa struggles to curb Ebola. Relatives of Ebola victims in Liberia defy government orders and dumped infected bodies in the streets as West African governments struggle to enforce tough measures to curb an outbreak of the virus that has killed, they've been saying this for over a week, 887 people. It's way over that, folks. Most estimates have been over 1,000 for a week. Sierra Leone deploys troops in Ebola crisis to control the border and other issues. We won't do that here, don't worry. Ebola virus spreads because of lax quarantine enforcement, says the World Health Organization in the New York Times. 5 new Ebola cases and another death confirmed in Nigeria. I think a lot of this testing and CDC stuff and UN stuff, undoubtedly these labs are becoming vectors for it, even if they're not trying to create it. It's no doubt SV40 that gave over 100 million Americans cancer on record was from the vaccine production. The question is, was it on purpose or by accident? Well, one of the developers of it told PBS television, we played the clip probably 100 times here, we got to pull it back up. He was interviewed by the Boston station, the PBS, aired nationally, back in the early 90s, that, oh, yeah, we knew it was in there, but there's too many people. Ha, ha, ha. I mean, this is the type of garbage we're dealing with. What's shocking is how Ebola patients look before they die. A British doctor working in Sierra Leone describes the horror of the deadly disease. Giant purple blisters everywhere, blood pouring out of every orifice.